guy always seems to be passed out. I don't know. We're trying to find some life.
Okay, ready to dive in. Today we're going deep into the story of John Wayne Gacy.
Oh, the killer clown.
Yeah, the killer clown. It's just crazy to think someone who, brought joy to kids as Pogo the Clown could be a serial killer.
Right.
Responsible for at least 33 deaths.
At least 33 young men and boys, yeah.
It's just mind-blowing. How do you even begin to reconcile those two sides of a person?
It is a chilling paradox, yeah. I mean, the duality of Gacy's life, I think that's really what makes it so fascinating
Right.
and terrifying. On the one hand, you have this seemingly ordinary man, successful contractor, active in his community, even a precinct captain.
Right, a real upstanding citizen involved in everything.
Exactly, but then hiding beneath this carefully constructed facade was a monster.
It's true. And that's what's so unsettling. It's like watching one of those horror movies
Right.
where the killer's your next door neighbor.
Yeah.
He was married twice, had children, well-liked by many people. How did he manage to fool everyone for so long?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Part of it was Gacy's incredible ability to manipulate and deceive. He was a master at compartmentalizing, keeping his dark secrets separate from his public persona. But then there's also this disturbing element of societal blindness, right?
Oh, for sure.
I mean, people wanted to believe in the image he projected, the good guy persona.
They wanted to believe it.
They did. It's easier to ignore the red flags when someone seems so normal,
Right.
so integrated into the community.
Totally. And that's part of what makes it so scary, right? It's like you never really know who you're dealing with.
You really don't.
It makes you wonder how many times people just brushed off maybe a bad feeling or an inconsistency in his stories
Exactly.
because they just couldn't fathom the truth.
Hmm.
To try and understand how he got away with it for so long, maybe we need to go back to the beginning.
Oh, okay.
I was reading that his childhood was pretty rough.
Absolutely. And childhood trauma, I mean, that can really leave lasting scars.
It can, yeah.
Gacy's father was an alcoholic, incredibly abusive, both physically and verbally.
Wow.
He constantly belittled Gacy, never really giving him that love and acceptance that a child needs. As if that wasn't enough, he was also sexually abused as a child.
Oh, gosh.
First by a family friend,
Right.
and then by a contractor he worked for.
That's just horrific. I mean, it's hard to imagine how those early experiences didn't warp his sense of self and his views on relationships.
Yeah.
Do you think that's where the seeds of his violent tendencies were planted?
It's impossible to say for certain, right?
Right.
But I think it's definitely a significant factor. When a child is subjected to that level of trauma, it can really disrupt their emotional development, their ability to form healthy attachments, their sense of empathy.
Yeah.
It's not an excuse for his actions, but understanding his past can help us shed some light on the darkness that festered within him.
It's true. It was like a twisted origin story, almost.
Yeah.
But then, despite this traumatic childhood, he seemed to build a relatively normal life as an adult. He went to business college, he worked as a salesman, got married, had kids.
He did.
It seems like he was almost trying to overcompensate for his past.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that's really where this carefully crafted mask comes into play.
Yeah.
He was driven to appear normal, successful, well-liked.
Right.
Think about it. He joined a clown club, performed at children's parties, was active in local politics.
It's just bizarre.
It really is.
Yeah.
It was as if he was constructing this perfect facade to hide the monster lurking beneath.
It's chilling. It's like, here's this guy putting on a happy face, making balloon animals for kids.
Right.
And all along, he's harboring these incredibly dark impulses.
Yeah.
And his business, PDM Contractors,
Yeah.
that was doing really well too, wasn't it?
Very successful. And unfortunately, that success played a role in his crimes.
Oh, how so?
He often hired young men,
Okay.
some of whom would become his victims.
Oh, wow.
It gave him this sense of power and control, this ability to lure vulnerable young men into his web under the guise of offering them work.
So he was using his position of authority, his business, as a hunting ground.
Essentially.
Wow. It's beyond disturbing.
Yeah.
How did he typically approach his victims? Was there like a pattern to his crimes?
Sadly, yes, there was a pattern. He often preyed on young men who were runaways, looking for work, in need of shelter. He'd offer them jobs, money, sometimes even just a place to stay.
Yeah.
Using his charm and the seemingly trustworthy nature
Right.
to gain their trust, he'd often create a sense of obligation. You know, like he was doing them a favor.
Right.
Then once he had them alone, he would use some kind of ruse, like showing them a magic trick.
Oh, wow.
Involving handcuffs or rope.
It's like something out of a nightmare. I remember learning about the horrifying discovery of the bodies under his house.
Oh, yeah.
Can you even imagine being one of the officers who had to go into that crawl space?
It's almost beyond comprehension, the sheer scale of the horror that they uncovered. They found the remains of 29 victims buried beneath his house, and then another 4 were recovered from the nearby Duplain River.
Oh my gosh.
Just the way he concealed the bodies, the methodical nature of it all, it speaks to this chilling level of premeditation and depravity.
It's mind-blowing. What was it like for the investigators on the case? I mean, how do you even process a crime scene of that magnitude?
It must have been incredibly challenging, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
Imagine the painstaking work of excavating the bodies, the stench, the knowledge that each set of remains represents a life tragically cut short.
Yeah.
And then, beyond the sheer gruesomeness, the investigators had to piece together this puzzle of his crimes, understand his methods, his motives, his psyche.
Yeah, that's what I find so fascinating about forensic science, is like putting together this giant, morbid jigsaw puzzle, searching for clues, connecting the dots, and ultimately bringing a killer to justice. What kind of evidence did they find at the crime scene, besides the bodies, that helped to build the case against Gacy?
They found a lot of disturbing items. Police badges, handcuffs, rope, pornographic materials.
Wow.
These items, they painted a picture of his sadistic tendencies and revealed the nature of his crimes. You have to remember, this was before DNA evidence was widely used.
Right.
So investigators really had to rely on those traditional forensic techniques like fingerprint analysis, fiber analysis, and ballistics to link him to the victims.
It makes you appreciate how far forensic science has come since then.
It really does.
So how did this House of Horrors finally come to light? What led to his arrest?
So Gacy's reign of terror, it started to unravel with the disappearance of 15-year-old Robert Piest in December of 1978.
Okay.
Piest was last seen leaving his job at a pharmacy to meet with Gacy about a potential construction job. And his mother, she had a gut feeling that something was terribly wrong.
That's like mother's intuition.
It really is. She became suspicious of Gacy's involvement.
What was it about Gacy that made her so suspicious?
She had heard about previous accusations against him involving young men.
Oh, wow.
And she just couldn't shake the feeling that he was involved in her son's disappearance.
Wow.
She was relentless in pushing the police to investigate him.
Good for her.
And it turned out her instincts were dead on.
Yeah.
A crucial piece of evidence, a pharmacy receipt belonging to Robert Piest, was found in Gacy's home.
Oh, wow.
This completely contradicted Gacy's claims that he hadn't seen the boy, and it gave investigators the break they needed to obtain a search warrant.
Wow. Talk about a turning point. One little receipt
I know.
brought down a serial killer.
It's incredible.
That's incredible. So once the police searched his house and found the bodies, I'm assuming he confessed, right?
So faced with the overwhelming evidence, he eventually confessed to the murders.
Good.
This confession, along with all the physical evidence found at his home, launched one of the most notorious serial killer investigations in American history.
Oh, for sure.
But even in the face of undeniable proof, Gacy's case was far from over.
Right. The trial, it must have been one of the most highly publicized trials of the decade.
Absolutely.
Everyone was talking about the killer clown. How did Gacy plead and what was his defense strategy?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. His defense team employed a very unexpected strategy. They entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity.
Oh, wow.
Their argument was that Gacy was suffering from multiple personality disorder and that he wasn't in control of his actions during the murders.
So they were essentially saying that Pogo the Clown, or maybe some other alter ego, was responsible for the killings, not John Wayne Gacy himself.
Exactly.
Did they really think that would fly?
It was a bold move, and I think some would say desperate.
Yes.
The defense called upon several mental health experts to testify about his alleged mental state. They painted a picture of a deeply troubled individual, someone with a fractured psyche, claiming that he was incapable of understanding the gravity of his actions.
That had to be a tough sell, considering the premeditation and the meticulous way he covered up his crimes.
It was.
How did the prosecution counter that argument? I mean, how do you prove that someone isn't insane?
The prosecution definitely had their work cut out for them. They argued that he was a calculating and manipulative individual who knew exactly what he was doing, They presented evidence of the careful planning involved in his crimes, the way he lured the victims, the methodical way he disposed of the bodies. And they pointed to the fact that he managed to maintain this normal facade for years.
Yeah.
Their point was that his claims of insanity were simply a ploy to avoid the death penalty.
It sounds like a classic battle of the experts. Whose version of the truth did the jury believe?
Well, after deliberating for only 2 hours, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all 33 counts of murder.
Wow, 2 hours.
It was a resounding rejection of the insanity plea, and he was sentenced to death for his crimes.
Wow, they didn't waste any time. It sounds like justice was served, even though it could never truly erase the pain and suffering he inflicted on so many families.
Yeah.
There's that quote from Gacy that always sends chills down my spine. Clowns can get away with murder.
Oh, yeah.
It's like he was almost bragging about his ability to deceive.
It is a chilling statement, isn't it?
It is.
It reveals a disturbing level of self-awareness, almost a perverse pride in his manipulative abilities.
Yeah.
He understood the power of his persona, how it disarmed people and allowed him to operate undetected for so long.
Right.
He was hiding in plain sight, using the very thing that brought joy to children as a mask for his evil.
It's a stark reminder that evil can wear many faces, that appearances can be incredibly deceiving.
Absolutely. It also highlights the importance of trusting your gut instincts,
Yes.
of questioning what you see and hear, and never dismissing those nagging doubts that something just isn't right. Predators often rely on our tendency to believe in the good in people,
Right.
to see what we want to see.
Yeah.
But sometimes the most monstrous evils hide behind the most ordinary facades.
So true. Yeah, it's terrifying to think how easily he was able to blend in and manipulate people.
Yeah.
Yeah, thinking about the investigation, it makes you wonder if there were any, missed opportunities, any red flags that maybe should have been noticed sooner.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely some missed opportunities. Back then, communication between law enforcement agencies wasn't as streamlined as it is today.
Okay.
Information about missing young men wasn't always effectively shared or connected.
Right.
You can imagine in a large metropolitan area like Chicago,
Yeah.
it's easy for cases to fall through the cracks,
Right.
for connections to be missed.
So even though there might have been reports of suspicious activity or missing persons, they weren't necessarily being pieced together
Exactly.
to form a larger picture.
Yeah. Gacy's case, along with other high-profile serial killer cases of that era, they really exposed the flaws in the system.
Yeah.
And it highlighted this urgent need for better communication and information sharing among law enforcement agencies.
Totally. It was a wake-up call, wasn't it? Like this realization that
was.
we needed more sophisticated methods for tracking missing persons and identifying these potential patterns of predatory behavior.
Absolutely.
It's a sobering thought that it often takes a tragedy of this magnitude
Yeah.
to bring about real systemic change. Do you think Gacy's case had a lasting impact on how these types of investigations are conducted today?
Absolutely. I mean, in the wake of the Gacy case, there was this major push to improve communication and coordination between law enforcement agencies.
Okay.
Databases were created to track missing persons more effectively,
Right.
and task forces were formed to focus specifically on serial crimes.
Okay.
There was a greater emphasis on recognizing patterns, on connecting the dots that might have been missed in the past.
That makes a lot of sense.
Oh.
And I imagine Gacy's case, with all the shocking details and the fact that he operated in these seemingly ordinary settings,
Yeah.
it must really raise public awareness about the dangers lurking beneath the surface.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it shattered this illusion that these types of crimes only happen in dark alleys
Right.
or to certain types of people.
Right.
It forced people to confront the reality that evil can lurk anywhere,
Yeah.
even in seemingly safe and familiar environments.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
It really is.
It made people realize that predators often hide in plain sight, using their positions of authority, their charm, their normalcy as a weapon.
Exactly.
It's a chilling reminder that we can never be too careful, that we need to trust our instincts and teach our children about personal safety. We've covered a lot of ground today, from his troubled upbringing to the gruesome discoveries at his home, his trial, his time on death row, and his execution.
But there's one question that keeps coming back to me. Could a John Wayne Gacy exist today? I mean, in our age of social media, background checks, heightened awareness,
Right.
could someone still manage to To fly under the radar like he did?
It's a question worth pondering, isn't it?
It is.
While the world has changed a lot since Gacy's time,
Right.
and we have more tools to track and apprehend criminals,
Yeah.
I do believe the potential for evil still exists.
Yeah.
Predators are always adapting, finding new ways to exploit vulnerabilities
Right.
and manipulate their victims. They're masters of deception,
Right.
able to blend in, gain trust. Think about the rise of online predators, for example.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They use the anonymity of the internet to lure their victims, often posing as someone they're not. The whole new frontier for criminal behavior. So while technology can be this powerful tool for crime fighting, it also creates new opportunities for those who wish to do harm. It's a constant cat and mouse game.
Exactly. We develop new safeguards, and criminals find new ways to circumvent them.
We can't afford to become complacent
No.
or assume that we've outsmarted evil.
Right.
The fight against those who prey on the innocent. It's an ongoing one, a battle that requires constant vigilance, both on an individual level and as a society. We need to educate ourselves, teach our children about safety, and support law enforcement in their efforts to keep our communities safe.
I agree.
This deep dive has been unsettling,
Yeah,
but also incredibly eye-opening.
it has.
It's a reminder that the world can be a dark and dangerous place, but it's also a call to action, right? We can't just sit back and hope for the best. We have to be proactive, aware, and engaged if we want to make a difference.
I couldn't agree more. We need to remember the victims, learn from their stories, and use that knowledge to protect future generations. By understanding the darkness, we can better equip ourselves to fight against it.
Well said. If you had one final thought to leave our listener with today, something to really ponder, what would it be?
I would challenge the listener to consider this. Knowing what we know about Gacy's ability to blend in, to appear normal while harboring such darkness within, how can you be more discerning? How can you learn to spot potential warning signs in your own community? It's not about living in fear, but about being informed, aware, and empowered to make a difference.
That's a powerful message. And to our listener, we encourage you to delve deeper into this case on your own.
Please do.
Research the victims, learn their stories, explore the investigative techniques that were used, and reflect on the questions we've raised today.
Yes.
Because by understanding the darkness, we can better equip ourselves to fight against it.
Well said. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
And as always, thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
So true. It's terrifying. Gacy was executed in 1994.
He was.
Bringing an end to this horrific chapter, I guess. But the scars he left behind, the victims' families and the community, they run deep.
They do. The impact of his crimes is still felt today.
It is. You know, it's easy to get caught up in the details of the investigation and the trial. But we can't forget about the human cost. The lives that were tragically cut short, the families that were shattered.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that each one of those 33 victims was an individual with their own hopes, dreams, and loved ones.
They weren't just numbers.
They weren't.
They were real people.
They were sons, brothers, friends.
It's a stark reminder that these crimes have real consequences for real people.
They do.
I'm curious, from your perspective as someone who's studied these cases extensively, what do you think is the most important takeaway
from the story of John Wayne Gacy?
I think the most important takeaway is that evil can wear many faces. That it can hide in plain sight. We need to be vigilant, trust our instincts, and never be afraid to speak up if we suspect something is wrong.
Well said. This deep dive has been unsettling, but also incredibly important, I think.
It is.
It's a reminder that the world can be a dark and dangerous place, but it's also a call to action.
It is.
Right? We can't just sit back and hope for the best. We have to be proactive, aware, and engaged if we want to make a difference.
I couldn't agree more. We need to remember the victims, learn from their stories, and use that knowledge to protect future generations. By understanding the darkness, we can better equip ourselves to fight against it.
Well said. And for our listeners out there, we encourage you to learn more about the victims, their stories, the lives they lived.
Absolutely.
Because behind the headlines and the sensationalism, there were real people.
There were.
Who deserved to be remembered and honored.
They did.
We've barely scratched the surface here today. And there's a wealth of information out there.
There is.
Books, documentaries, articles. So we encourage you to dig deeper, to learn more, and to never forget the lessons that we can learn from this tragic case.
Stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
And as always, thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.